Good morning and welcome to live Q&A here in the Manager Critic group. I'm Cheryl Andrews. I'm the founder of Step by Step Listening and the one of the facilitators of this group, where we are committed to becoming a community of non-judgmental listeners. So if you come online, please say hi, put hello there, because sometimes it says I've got somebody live, but I can't see who you are. So today the subject is part 2 of how to improve listening skills, and we're looking at the different kinds of listening. So this week we're looking at what is clean language. So a quick recap for those who haven't seen video 1 and 2 first. Well, video 1 was counselling listening. So when we go to counsellors, we go there because we have got something in our past to talk about. And the truth is, it's really difficult as humans to listen to a story about what's not working. Most of us as human beings have, our emotions start coming up. We feel for the other person. It's difficult. It's why when we watch sad movies, we might have emotions triggered, etc. So counselling is somewhere we go to if we want to have to download, talk about what didn't work and the past, generally speaking. And as we get that story out and it's been heard and it's honoured and it's respected and it's not judged, the magic starts to happen. And through that, the counsellors will give you activities to start to look at things in a different way, in a different perspective. But that's definitely for people who really need the whole of their story, the what's not working, to be heard. And what can we do as a community is, with our friends and family, is listen for longer, have the ability to hold that space without telling them how they should think or feel or correcting them or trying to move them into happy. When we're going through grief or going through loss, having those anger, that frustration, that fear, that loss honoured and heard can often mean that our friends and family can move on faster. But what tends to happen is people don't listen to the whole of the story, and they don't hear all of it. They only hear the pain and the grief, and they don't perhaps hear the things that they're talking about that is working. And so the people keep telling the story because it hasn't been heard. So that's counselling listening. Good morning. We've got 2 of you live today. Please do say hello and put your name below. That'd be great. And the other one we talked about was coaching. So coaching is when you have got to the point where you're sick and tired of your story, you go to a coach, and a coach would ask you questions that will move you from where you are now to where you want to be. So they are solution focused. They're good morning, Sean. They're forward focused. They're going to be asking about what you want rather than what you don't want. They're going to be asking you to set goals, think about the future, timelines. Generally, coaches, a traditional coach might say to you, what do you want in the next year in your lifetime? So if you're looking at legacy. And it's a really good coaching activity to sort of think about, at your funeral, what do you want people to be saying about you to your children? What do you want the people to come up to your kids and say? And do you want it to be truthful? Do you want it to be the truth, or are they just showing the good parts of you, or do you want that to be the whole of you? So what's your legacy you want to leave by? What coaching's about, like in your life, what do you want to do in the next 5 years, in the next year, next 90 days, 30 days, in the next week? Coaching's very forward focused. And today I want to talk to you about clean language, and I'm a clean language coach. So I'm a combination of the two modems, if you like. And I want to talk to you a bit about clean today and how that differs from traditional coaching. So again, that if you are looking for help, you're looking for support, you know what kind of listening you need, but also when to apply this in your life for yourself and when to use it for your friends and family. So clean language for me is it's a questioning technique developed by a chap called David Grove in the 1980s, who was working with PTSD victims from Vietnam. And what he found was that if he cleaned the question up of any assumptions and judgments, so coaching makes the assumption the person doesn't want to be where they are now and they want to be somewhere different. It also says things like, so what's your goal? So it makes the assumption that they have a goal. But the truth is that the way all of our brains work and the way that we process the world, and particularly the way we process time, is that each one of us will hear those questions, and some of us, our brains are going, no idea. And then we think we're stupid because we can't answer the question. Then we think there's something wrong with us because this is an intelligent person asking us an intelligent question, and we're going, no friggin' idea. And so people start to lose confidence because the questions that are being asked have an assumption. Add into that in my experience, and I run a whole program called Master Your Critic, where we go away for 5 days and we model out how to ask good questions. There is a common pattern that comes up is people assume when they're being asked a question from somebody else that the other person already knows the answer. So if you think about school, they teach you something and then they ask you a question to see if you've understood it. Parents will tell you how to behave and then they'll ask you questions to check you've understood it. But they have an answer they want you to give back. So we can get into a pattern with questions that we believe other people already are asking us questions they know the answer to. And so clean language, coaching tends to have an assumption that you want to move forward, and therefore you work with coaches when you want to move forward. A coach has an assumption that you have goals, that you want to stretch yourself, that you want to be outside your comfort zone, that you want to do things that you're not comfortable with. So coaching makes all of those assumptions. Clean language, David Grove discovered, if you cleaned the question up and you ask questions that you didn't know the answer to. So if I'm working with a client, I'm not asking questions that I know the answer to. I'm asking questions I believe the client will know the answer to. And when they don't know the answer, that's information for me to calibrate and change the kind of questions I ask and what I ask questions of. And every single client I work with is different. And so I can never say you do X, Y, and Z, and you have to do it in this order, because I'm always having to calibrate to that individual's way of responding to questions, because we're all unique. Our map of the world, the way that we process, our life experiences, our triggers, our meaning of words and languages, everybody will be different. So David Grove worked out that if you asked questions that didn't have assumptions, so what would you like to have happen? That person can answer, I want to talk about my past story. I want to talk about what's not working, and they can answer however they want to answer. They can talk about what's not working. They can talk in the present tense. They can talk about the past. They can talk about the future. And when I ask a client, what would you like to have happen? It gives them freedom. Now, for lots of people, they will answer, I don't know. And it's because they have perhaps never been asked questions that somebody else doesn't have the answer for. They kind of say, don't know. And there's almost an anticipation that they're expecting me then to tell them what they should be doing or how they should be doing it. And so for me, clean language, for me, when I came across it, when I was asked these questions, it was the first time, and I'll try not to have any tears, good morning, Anne. It was the first time in my life that I had experienced somebody asking me questions who actually believed I knew the answers about myself. And it was a bit of a wake-up call, because I really didn't know myself very well. And I started in the clean language world because I was training to listen to other people. So I was really curious about other people. I was really, I wanted to know how they do it, and because it's all out there and it's not to do with me and I can find out about them. But when you train as a clean language facilitator, you have to be a client at times so that other people who are trained to be facilitators have someone to practice on. And so I had to keep going into client mode. And I might be asked questions for 15, 20 minutes, and I get like, oh, is that how I think about things? Oh, is that how I do things? And the lovely thing is when you work with clean and you're working in a group where everybody's going, oh, is that how I do? Oh, is that how I think? So clean language is a questioning technique that reflects you back to you. So how it works is that there are about 19 questions that are stripped as much as possible from any assumption, so that you are not being led by the questioner to think or feel or answer it in a particular way. You can be completely honest with yourself. Then what he worked out is if you reflected the words directly back to the person exactly as they were, without reframing them or summarizing them or making them sound grammatically correct. So if someone says, I want to be successful, I would ask, and what kind of I is that I, and what kind of successful? I wouldn't, sometimes if I'm someone very new to working with me with clean, I might say, when you want to be successful, what kind of you is that you? So that it's really clear that I'm talking about them and not I as in me. But the whole point behind David Grove's work was that you repeat their words exactly as they say them, so that they hear themselves. They don't hear you. And my job is to reflect back their pace, their tone. Always a little bit difficult if someone's got a very strong accent. I don't look to try and replicate their accent, as I look like I'm taking a mickey. So it is, as best I can, I will reflect back exactly their tone, their pace, their energy, their words, so they hear themselves. And often with clean language, this is the first time someone's actually heard themselves. It's such an honouring process, and it can be really scary. I remember feeling like I was all alone because I was suddenly having to look at myself, and I was no longer comparing myself to other people. I had no way of validating if it was okay for me to feel like this. There was no way of validating that, was it all right? Because this is how I'm feeling, and this is what it seems to be happening in my world, and this seems to be the way that I'm processing the world. And clean is very, I suppose, sterile might be a word, because when I facilitate someone, it's not about them having a relationship with me. I'm building a relationship with the information. And so when I became a clean language facilitator, what I discovered is that if you're using this with your friends, I say to people, if you're going to use clean language questions with your friends, you might say to them, if they're talking about what they don't want, you might say, what would you like to have happen? And you'll listen to them, and they may still tell you what they don't want and what didn't work. And that would be, for me, that is about that part of their story hasn't been heard. And so you might need to repeat back. So, so what I'm hearing is, and you repeat it back to them so they really do know that you've heard it and that you're not judging it. In my experience, they'll repeat that story over and over again. And my job is to honour it and reflect it back, and then say, and so given all that, what would you like to have happen? So in everyday conversation, I reckon you can get away with about 3 questions before it feels uncomfortable or weird. And I mean, the reason it's uncomfortable and weird is because it's all about them, and people aren't used to having it all about them. So I would usually ask a couple of questions, like, my one that's not clean, but it's one that's worked for me. If you're finding someone's talking about what they don't want, then, it's really what I call under my strength and solution detective listening. I might ask them, so, is there anything that's working at the moment for you, or what has worked in the past to get out of this kind of situation? And they might still tell me, well, I don't know, I've never had anything, and they still need to talk about what didn't work. But you can ask 3 questions comfortably in a conversation. And I would generally say to people at that point, especially if people, Sean and I have had coffee as friends, and Anne and I have had friends, and I will say to you, if someone's really talking about something that's not working, and I've listened and listened, and I've met up with them several times as friends, and they're still talking about the thing that's not working, I would then say to them, look, you've talked about it, and I've made some suggestions as a friend. I've talked about what I've done, and we've had a conversation about it. And to me, it doesn't feel like anything's moving or shifting, and it's like you're stuck here in this space. Are you happy for me to ask you some questions? That's what I would do when I'm working if I'm with a friend who's stuck. I would ask them if it's okay if I ask them a few questions, so that they consciously know that it's going to shift from me giving my opinion or empathizing or reassuring them to, do you know what, I really believe you could work this out. I do know you know yourself really well. I believe in you, and I believe you've got it inside, and can I ask you some questions? And that's generally how I work when I work with my friends. And I found that's what I needed to do with clients who've done no personal development, who never really looked at themselves, never really got curious. And so I call it, on the confidence process, I will chat with purpose. So I'm asking questions of being curious, but it's very conversational. I'll ask the outcome question, what would you like to have happen? And then I'll say to them, like, I think the best thing I can do is ask questions. How do you need to be, or how does that need to be for you to be okay with me asking questions? And that's when we find out that people, feel very uncomfortable talking about themselves, or they've never thought about it and they feel bad because they don't know the answers. But I want you to know that it depends on how you process information. The reason I don't work with clients, generally speaking, on one session, I always do 3, a minimum of 3, and I usually work for anything for 8 to 16 sessions with clients, is that it's an iterative process. I'll ask you a question you have never thought about. Maybe you've never thought about what you really like to have happen. Okay, and when you do start to think, so you go off, I ask you the question, you go, I don't know, and then the next few days your attention's on it, and you'll start to think about, what do I want? What is it that really brings me joy? What does it make me really happy? What is it I love to do? And so you'll pay attention, you'll start collecting the evidence. And then when I come back and I ask you the same question again, I go, what would you like to happen? Now you'll have some more. And my experience of doing this work is that, depending on how your time profile works, for some people, if I ask you what you'd like to have happen, you might answer with what you'd like to have happen today. Other people have got really big pictures. They might go, in the next 100 years, I'd like to change the way the world feels about X, Y, and Z. So depending who you are, your time profile, the time perception, what you'd like to happen will cover, it can be very varied. And my experience has said that we need, as human beings, for our critic to be settled, we need to, when we've got an idea of what we want our legacy to be, you know, what we want people to think about us when we've died, and we know what we want for today, and we want something in the short term, if we've got some ideas, then all of our decisions become aligned. And I have quite a simple legacy, is I want to die knowing that people thought I was loving. That's what I want, and I want to die feeling loved, and that's it. So I do everything I can now to for me to be loving. I have to love myself. I have to love the fact that I talk quite a lot, and I have to love and honor the fact I like asking questions and I'm a coach. And some of my friends will go, oh, Shell, don't go into coaching mode, don't start coaching me. And that's fine, because they don't want to find the solution right now, or they don't want to talk about that right now. It's not right for them. And I can honor that. I can be loving, and I can step back and listen, or change the subject, or do whatever we need to do. But for me to be loving is for me to hold space for someone in a way that works for them, without it discounting or disrespecting who I am. Because I believe that if I'm not loving and honoring me in that space, I'm not role modeling loving. So if I put myself down in order to make somebody else feel good, then that isn't loving. How could I possibly? I would probably be remembered for being the victim, for being needy, feeling sorry for myself. If I always went, oh, I'm really sorry, I always ask loads of questions, whatever you need me to do, I'll be you. If I can't show up as the whole of me, have compassion, have understanding and respect for what people need, but it has to be like a dance. You know, sometimes you'll be in the spotlight, sometimes I will be. We're going to yin and yang. It's always about me honoring what other people want and putting all of their needs first and never bringing myself into it. How could that be loving? So clean language, going back to that, and I thought lots about after we last met. I think I know what is holding me back. Yay! Now just get to fix it. Can't wait for our session. Can't wait for us to work on that in the Clarity and Confidence Retreat. Awareness and knowing what is happening is absolutely the first step. And we can only do that if we look in the mirror. And clean language, so going back to what is clean language, which is today's subject, is David Grove cleaned up the questions so that, and it can feel a bit strange, Anne, I'm sure you know that, when you get asked the questions and you've never thought about it, then you can feel a little bit like you're hanging in space. It can feel a bit weird because you're suddenly responsible for yourself and responsible for looking at yourself. And the truth is, most of us haven't looked at ourselves. I've got really curious in the last few years, particularly doing like these videos. So I watch my videos again, which before I never did. I look at photographs of myself. I listen to audios of myself. I've got my book, so I see my writing, I see my words back reflected to me. All of those things I've been doing as a self-employed person. Now, you don't have to be self-employed to do this kind of development, but all of those things are doing what clean language does. Clean language is reflecting us back to ourselves. It's giving us a perspective of ourselves that's outside our conscious awareness right now. Our subconscious is probably aware, well, not probably, it is aware of it, but we are not articulating it. We're not bringing it to the surface. We're not talking about it. So our conscious mind isn't aware of it. And when our conscious mind isn't aware of it, when we make decisions, when we decide whether to speak or to ask questions, whether we decide to be quiet, whether we decide to take action, whether we decide to take rest, if we're not consciously aware of the whole of the system, then when we make decisions, they're often ill-informed. They haven't got the whole picture in. They've only got, a survival mechanism that we're going down here. So David Grove worked out that if you ask questions that you don't know the answer to, and you ask questions that are void of assumption as much as possible, and I do say that because there are a couple that have got an assumption, which I'm going to tell you about now, then people can get clarity of their own thinking. But what you also notice is that as human beings, we use metaphor probably every 6 words. In a sentence, if you listen to yourself, you'll say things like, I need to get over myself. I think I just look holding me back. You've got there, and in your words. So that, you're not, there's nothing physically holding you, but it's like something's holding you back. So these are metaphors that we use. And what David Grove worked out, if you use clean language questions and you ask questions of the metaphor as though it's real. So when holding back, that's like what? And if people allow themselves, and I do say allow because often people feel they sound stupid or God, this sounds really daft. But you know, if you get that picture, I'm holding back. I mean, my thing used to say, you know, unraveling what's holding you back, because that was a common metaphor that came up. But the version of what was holding, people would have, well, it feels like I've got two hands on my shoulders and I'm being pulled back. Other people say I've got a brace around my stomach and I feel like I'm tied to something. And other people say, well, I think my feet are stuck in treacle and I just can't lift them up. And other people say, I feel like I'm flat on my back and everything's really heavy. Whatever the metaphor is for you. But what he discovered is that if you could ask questions of the metaphor, because our brain thinks in pictures, the complex became easy to understand. The complex became easy to change. The complex became easy to explain to our loved ones and our friends and people that we have to work with. And so lack of confidence, go it alone in your case. It's great that you know that, and I can't wait for us to work together. I absolutely can't wait. And the irony about human nature is that we want to, and particularly I think in the last sort of 50, 60, 100 years, particularly women as well, have been really striving for independence. One of the books I'm going to write is Independence Overrated, because we do need to know that we're okay. That gives us a self-assurance that we're all right on our own. But we are, you know, we're pack animals. We're meant to be connected. We're meant to be there. So one thing I want to say to you, Anne, you know, whether you work with me as a coaching client for this period of change you're going through, or whether we say it's just as friends, you are never going to be alone. All right? Not ever. As long as I'm alive, you will not be going alone. You will have support and you will have encouragement and you will make it. You've put, I prefer to do things with someone to share ideas and validate my thoughts, ideas. Yeah, that's why clarity and confidence retreats are so powerful, because the human brain does need to articulate it and have it reflected back. And when people work with me one-to-one, they just get them self-reflected back to them. If they work with me as a strength and solution detective, not just as a clean language facilitator, then they can have whatever kind of listening they want. As a strength and solution detective, I will listen to counselling listening. I do say to people, though, I charge a lot of money for counselling. You know, my rates, £300 a session to £25–30 for counselling. If you do need to tell your story, I do say to people, go and have some counselling sessions, or go and find 6 friends and tell that story over and over again until you come back to your session with me. So, because I can listen to it, but from a financial point of view, not with my friends, I will listen to it. But from a financial point of view, when people invest with me, it's better if they find other people to tell that story to over and over again, and then they come to me to start doing the clean language coaching, and then I can give feedback as well. As a strength and solution detective, I'm going to give you feedback. I'm going to tell you directly what I'm noticing works about you. I'm going to give you my opinions about stuff, and as a mentor for you, your business, your coach, your life, I'm going to tell you what I'm noticing that's missing. And with the clarity and confidence retreats, the reason why they're so powerful is they're somewhere in the middle, because you get one-to-one coaching to get to know yourself. You're in a group environment, so you hear other people generating ideas around the same kind of subject, you know, whether it's business or people or confidence or clarity. And so your brain's got the external stimuli of different opinions without anyone directly saying what you need to do is this. No one will ever tell you in a clarity and confidence retreat, and even I don't tell you what you should think or how you should feel or what you should do. If I say to people, I might say, look, I'm going to place on the table, metaphorical table, this is what I'm noticing. If it's useful to you, go and play around with it, try it on for size. If it doesn't fit and it doesn't work, I'm not precious. It doesn't bother me if you don't like the idea. Just leave it behind and don't take it with you. And so we need that, and we absolutely need to have someone who's going to allow us to bounce ideas off of. And particularly if you go self-employed, I will say our partners, they want to help us. But they don't get it. My husband's been employed all his life, and it's taken us quite a while to get to the point where I understand what I need him to listen to and what to go to him for advice for and what not to. Wealth Dynamics helped me because I understand he's an accumulator. So if I go to him, he's going to ask me how much it's going to cost, how long is it going to take to get your money back. And I used to think that was really negative. I used to think that he was being you know, critical. He wasn't being very positive about it. That's because I had fear. I didn't know how I was going to make money. I didn't know how quickly I was going to get it back. I didn't have the answers to the questions. Now I go, oh, I don't know the answer to that. I'll go and find out. That's because I've got clarity of who I am and confidence of who I am, that I'm not feeling challenged by other people's questions. So Anne, you've put, you made me smile knowing you're always going to be there. I'm always going to be here for you too. That's friendship. It is indeed, darling. And it's been able to listen to the good, the bad, the ugly. And people have me in their life. My friends generally don't come to me talking about what's not working all the time. They tend to come to me when they're sick of talking about what's not working, because they now go, actually, I'm sick of this. I want it to change. And that's great, because people know that's my strength and that's the value that I bring to the world, and I'm honoured for that. But I'm also equally understand when things are difficult and it's painful. I've had to learn to be a more patient friend. I love being a coach. People pay me to move out of the crap and get into a happy place, and I love watching that transformation. My friends, my family don't pay me to move them out of their crap, and they sometimes want me to stay there with them and listen to it. And I've had to learn to have more compassion and more empathy, and to go, oh God, that must be really tough, and just be there with them in the shitty stuff and the not so nice stuff, instead of trying to make them feel happy or better. So going back to today's summary then, clean language is about asking questions that you don't know the answer to. It's about asking questions that are eradicated of assumption and leading the other person to infer there has to be a particular answer. There is just what there is. It's what's true for you right now, and the good news is in 10 seconds time it could change, and that's also okay. Clean language is also about being curious about the metaphors that we're using in our language and using them to help us to understand complex things easily. And so the two questions that are that have some assumption to it is, I might ask you, so when you've got confidence to go alone, that's like what? Okay. And if you're like, oh, no idea, I might ask the question, does confidence have a shape or size? Now that is it's got an inference. It's got an inference that it might have a shape or size, okay? But that's because one thing we know with this work is that when we have a metaphorical representation of it, when we can describe it as something else, it becomes almost detached from us. It becomes something that we can observe and talk about. And it moves it from that intellectual state where we're just talking about words and numbers to a tangible thing. So when confidence has a shape or size, and I might ask you, whereabouts is that confidence? And confidence could be like way over there, and it's like this big, and it's like a speck in the distance. Or confidence could be this big glowing orange sun that's inside of you. It'll be wherever it needs to be. Everybody will be different. And we can then ask, what's that speck like to have happen, or what would that sun like to have happen? And when you can ask it of that, like it's a third party, like it's not you, then we get the same benefits, if you like, of when we're really good at helping other people with their problems. When we can see other people's problems, it's so much easier to solve it. So clean language for me gave me a way of kind of observing myself and looking at myself. But I had to learn to look at myself with compassion, to give all of me equal opportunity to be heard. So not to focus on, you know, like if I looked at a picture, I might focus on my double chin or my wonky nose or whatever, instead of noticing that I have sparkly eyes and a great smile, and that my skin, generally speaking, is usually pretty good. So, you know, when I used to observe myself, my critique would get straight into what's not working. And yet when I trained as a clean language facilitator, I was trained to give all information equal opportunity. So I don't ignore what other people might label negative stuff. I don't ignore the stuff that's not working. I'll go, okay, so when you don't want to go alone, and confidence, what would you like to have happen? And we do generally want to develop in more detail the solution that you want, and we're going to develop the strengths, but that's not without giving the what's not working equal opportunity. And some clients have to fully develop the problem in order to find the solution. 85–90% of the time I can ask people what they want to have happen, and we can focus on that, what they want. But there is a percentage of people that the only way they're going to shift into knowing what they want is to completely understand what's not working now. They just have a feeling it's not working, as a sense. So when you've got feelings, you know, clean language is so powerful when it comes to that niggle, that annoying thing. And you and I have been talking on and off for about 5 or 6 months now recently, because you've known me as a friend, you wanted to make some changes. And so what we've done as our friendship, we've shifted from friendship into coaching. Because I've said, right, at this point, to get the answers is we need to move to this, because I'm not going to get anywhere with just a conversation. You have to go up a level. You have to look at yourself. You have to be willing to look at yourself. And clean language gives you that tool to actually take stock of who you are and what's happening. And when you've got emotions involved, a feeling, intuition, I've got this feeling, I've got this niggle, I've got this sense, they're really kind of non-tangible. They're really quite difficult to articulate. And the reason why clean language transformed my life is it gave me a way of understanding how I felt about things. It also gave me a way of understanding my logical process, that whilst I looked like I was going around the houses talking, actually I have a process. What I'm doing is, when I'm talking, I'm going like, oh, there's a file over there, and I'm trying to make sense. I'm trying to collect it all up. So I know what I'm doing and how I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And I also know it annoys people. Somebody else is like, oh, when's she going to get to the point? So when I look at people and I'm talking and they've asked me a question and I've gone blah, 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 blah. And they look like perplexed, I'll just say to them, oh, don't worry, I'm just talking to think. I'm talking out loud to process it. Are you okay listening for a bit? And if they go, no, it's driving around the bend, I can say, okay, I'll leave it with me then, and I'll go and find someone else to talk to, or I'll write it down, or I'll do whatever I've got to do to make all the connections. But I've learned to be okay with saying to people that if you want the answer, the real answer, you're going to need to bear with me, because it very rarely comes out first. And what I've discovered is the answer comes out last. So even when I write an email, I'll write the middle, the end, and that's the last paragraph that I'll write in an email. If I copy and paste it and put it at the beginning, it's always what I should have started with. And it doesn't matter. I've done everything I can, but it's the way that my brain works. I'm getting much better to do it internally, and I'm getting much better at doing it on my own through writing rather than talking out with people. So I'm giving, taking up less of other people's time. But if it's the quickest way for me to do it is to talk to somebody, because that's how I do me. And I've got other friends. Mark would rather not talk. He'd rather go and think it through, and then he comes back. So I might ask him a question, and 3 days later I get the answer. If he hasn't forgotten, I ask the question. But if he really knows he's got to be thinking about it, he'll come back later, and we're all different in that way. Okay, so it's 8:30. I'm going to realise I'm going on now. So for me, clean language is the way to get to understand complex things easy. It's for the hard to articulate stuff. And you can use what we call clean light. You can use clean language in everyday conversations. Things like if someone says, I feel really excited, you might go, tell me more about that, or is there anything else about excited? So you're encouraging people to talk about it without any inference, without inferring that what they're doing is right or wrong. You're just asking. It's a level of curiosity, and clarity. The process I talk about in the book, Manage Your Critic, From Overwhelm to Clarity. Each of those steps is a principle, if you like, an aspect of the ethics and the ethos behind clean language. So C is for curiosity. We're asked a question we don't know the answer to. Language, we're putting people's attention on the language that they're using metaphorically, what the words are, whether it's past tense, future, what pronouns we're putting. The attention, we're looking for patterns. Do they tend to answer in the past tense, the present tense, or future? Do they tend to answer about other people or themselves? Do they tend to answer about, do they have to internally reflect before they answer? We're noticing patterns of attention. And I will say, without judgment, I am not a psychologist. I am not analysing it. So when I see patterns of behaviour, I don't then go, oh, they are an attention seeker, or, oh, they are a whatever. They're needy, or they're strong, or they're dominant, or they're pushy, or whatever other labels that the system seems to put on behaviours. I simply notice the behaviour without a label, and I reflect it back to the client so they can make a decision. Does this behaviour work for me or not? Does it serve me? Does it help me? When does it work for me, and when doesn't it work for me? And then R is reflection. It's reflecting exactly back. It's a mirror. It's not my opinion. It's about me putting the mirror up so that the person can see themselves. They can hear themselves. They can experience themselves. They can get to know themselves. And then the I is the intention. That tends to be when I get into the intention is to do it drama free. It's without judgment. It's without inferring that they're right or wrong. They're just what is. The intention is to do it from a place of love, not a place of fear or judgment. So clean language is about honoring all that is. And I have to have the courage to listen to some really sad stuff in people's lives. Some people go through some really awful things. So I have to honor it. Equally, some people are really, really successful, and I have to not be jealous of it. I have to honor, that it's taught me to just honor what I'm hearing without going to victim and going, oh, they're really successful, but I'm really crap, in my head, by the way. And I wasn't good at doing that when I first started 10 years ago, when I first trained, and it's been a work in progress. And if I get a little bit of a trigger when I'm listening to somebody, I throw it in what I call my metaphorical Cheryl's bin, and once the client's left, I get it out and go, okay, so I'm a bit jealous of that, or I was a bit critical of that. What's that about? And then the more I unpack that rubbish, the less angst I bring to relationships, the less angst I bring to conversations, and the more I can show up as a loving person that has the intention of listening without judgment. But I am human and I do have judgment, so I'll be lying if I said I didn't. But the difference is I'm working on undoing them and looking at the beliefs behind them. T is the trust. That's about trusting your own process. So clean language is also about, we can go deep into and look at, this is like what, and get really clear about the metaphor. And we can go sequencing. We can go, okay, so when you've got confidence inside, it's like a sun, then what happens? Or if you've got confidence over there and there's a speck, then what happens? And then what happens? And then what happens? So it's like the sequence. So trust comes when you know your process, you know how you do you. And there's some magic that happens when you facilitate with clean and you know 3 of your models. So one of the ones I do in the course, Do Delegate or Ditch, we do working at your best, learning at your best, living at your best. And when you know your process for all of those and you overlay them, you get to get the blueprint of you. You start to see the magic in yourself and how you do you and how you bring value and how what you matter about you. So then you start to trust yourself. And clean with lots of iterations and lots of curiosity, and start to really notice your process and start to connect those processes together. That's when you truly trust yourself. There's also a thing that you need to trust the process, that the intention isn't to catch you out or trip you up. It's about you getting to know yourself and honoring the whole of you. And the why is that you matter. The whole of you matters, the whole of your story. I do think that we've become a bit of a society that should only talk about, stiff upper lip and talk about what's working. And the reality is that, life throws stuff at us. So we have the whole story, which is the what's not working, what is working, what could work better. There's every strength that you've got can be somebody else's nemesis. It could, the fact I talk drives some people to, round the bend. The introverts in my life love it because it gives them space to reflect and think. But the whole of you and the whole of me, the why, is that you have a purpose. You matter. And I think people get wrapped up in what's my big purpose? Have I got a massive purpose in the globe? And I think that we forget that sometimes just being an amazing mother, being an amazing working mother, being an amazing working dad, being an amazing husband, wife, friend, sister. If your purpose is to be the best of whatever you are right now in your world, it will have a ripple effect on everybody else. When you show up for yourself and you take care of yourself and you know that you matter, you teach those nearest to you to know that they matter. And when you teach them to know that they matter, they can teach those that are nearest to them that they matter. And you do matter. If you don't feel like it, please get in touch, because it's your responsibility to listen to your story, to take away the drama that you're the victim of your own life story. You are the hero in your story. And if you don't feel like the hero right now, it's because you're not looking at the whole of you. You're just looking at parts of you that you've had reflected back maybe to other people, or that's the only bit you're reflecting back to yourself, but you're only having the worst of you reflected back, not the best of you. And that worst might just be you in somebody else's perspective. So I was often told I talk too much. My talking changes lives. People told me I come across too needy, that I overshare, I overanalyze. All right. My analysis, my sharing, my vulnerability, my ability to be here in a public forum and say, this is how I feel, changes lives. And for some people, and usually my close friends, they find it uncomfortable. It's not right for them. They don't do that kind of feely touchy stuff. They don't think it's appropriate. They have a belief that you should keep those things quiet and should just get on and get on with it. It's not their world. And so they will tell me that my way of being isn't okay. And sometimes I talk too much. But the more I look at it, as long as I've given those people permission to go, shut up, Shona, let me know. So I'm not talking too much. It's now 20 to 9. And I've probably gone on too much now, because I do say it's going to be a half an hour call, but I've got into a bit of a passion and a bit of flow. That's what happens when I'm talking about stuff I really love and I think I can make a difference. It comes out. So on that note, what I'd like to find out from you today is on the comments below, and also if you see it on the YouTube, because I really want Google to think and know that I've got something worth saying. So if you can comment on my YouTube channel as well, which will be up in a day at the end of the day, please pop below. What do you know now as a result of listening to this video, if anything? What difference does knowing that make? And what will you do different as a result of this video? Will anything change? Has anything changed just by listening to the video? And I look forward to hearing what difference the video is making to you. And please do come back and share with me in the group, because I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for joining me today, Anne, and I will speak to you all soon. Lots of love. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you again next week, where we'll talk more about the strength and solution detective listening and how that differs a little bit from the clean language. Speak to you soon.